Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for this one few second hiccups. And nice to be with you all on this world because that has changed the world the way it is changing the lives of infertile couples. And we all know, and that's the reason why Nobel Prize was awarded to the inventor of IVF.
You are now muted.
Now, very interesting thing, obviously, is that the first IVF baby of the world was a natural IVF cycle that we all know, and that is then they invented multiple things and the technology and ovarian stimulation, which Rishikesh talked in much more details. The goal of IVF is very simple. What we want is a normal, healthy life, and that is the simple goal which we have. Normally, when we talk of the world, they expect a singleton. But when we think of India, then twins is also very much welcomed by many of our patients. And that's where this debate will continue whether the twins is a welcome thing or not a welcome thing in IVF. So far as India is concerned in particular. As Rishikesh said that the major advent in IVF, the improving in the success rate of IVF occurred because of the ovarian stimulation and of course multiple other things. Ovarian stimulation, a successful ovarian stimulation remains the mainstay of a good outcome in IVF because rest of the technology and techniques remain constant for most of the patients. So why ovarian stimulation is important is more follicles, more eggs, more embryos, and obviously more pregnancy. But at the same time, a little disadvantage because more estrogen, faster E2 rise, premature LH surge, and leading to poor pregnancy chance. Fortunately, we had two more molecules which Rishikesh discussed or just touched. One is GnRH agonist and one is GnRH antagonist. Cannot go into the details of how they work and what they do. But they do a very fantastic job of one, recruiting very good cohort of follicles, and two, allowing or stopping premature LH surge, preventing premature LH surge, and allowing all the follicles to develop to the maturity and give us very good cohort of follicles and in turn, good number of eggs. So there's a dramatic improvement in the success rate because of this. More eggs, naturally more pregnancy, and even more pregnancy with cumulative effect. That means the additional embryos which are frozen, when we use them, then finally the pregnancy chance what we get is even better. So that is the fundamental thing, and that's why the ovarian stimulation in IVF is practiced and is going to stay. But then as Rishikesh pointed out that there are issues with aggressive ovarian stimulation because there can be hyperstimulation and there can be unnecessary production of eggs and possibility of complications. So the terminology came is individualized controlled ovarian stimulation, and that is where we try to optimize the number of eggs which we want to produce for that. But we still don't have a very clear idea as to what is the number which we are looking at to produce a successful live birth in the patient. And that is where the consensus or the personal opinion or experience of the clinic decides that it may be 10, 15, or maximum of 20 total number of eggs, which gives a live birth child in their own setup. Everybody naturally, not only the patients, but consultants as well want 100% success in IVF, but still it has remained a distant dream. And why it is so? When I say 100% success in IVF is one cycle I'm talking about. Of course, if we do the multiple cycles, naturally the success rate goes high and we can achieve 98% live birth rate in the patients if they do sufficient number of treatment cycles, if they don't have very, very bad prognostic factors. But then in that case, why is a distant dream? That is the question which we need to understand. Now, there can be reasons for failure like uterine factor, endometrium factor, or maternal factors. And of course, most commonly what we believe is the egg, sperm, or embryos may be the culprits. But today, I would like to highlight the point which is considered to be one of the most important points in giving lesser success in the fresh ovum pickup cycles. Now, what is it that we talked about? The ovarian stimulation. And when we stimulate the ovary, there is hormone imbalance, supraphysiological hormone levels, and that leads to altered gene expression in the endometrium. Endometrium is more advanced and implantation window is disrupted. Now, this is the theory which we all believe, and that is the reason why we believe that whenever there is a hyperstimulation or controlled ovarian stimulation, there may be disruption in the implantation window. So now what we do? We go back to the natural cycle IVF. No, it's not possible, because we know that the natural cycle IVF gives a very, very poor success rate. And then what we do? We go to the natural like cycle IVF. How do all freeze protocol and only FET? Now, this is something which is talked about a lot today, and Rishikesh also touched the subject today, that everybody feels that this is the safest protocol, gives them excellent results and better pregnancy chance, etc. And that is why I would like to discuss that more in detail with a critical evaluation. Now, it's just like the fashion repeats, like we used to wear bell-bottom pants when we were in college, and now we see that it again coming as a fashion. So is the freeze all and the natural cycle pregnancy or the natural cycle IVF or what we call it HRT cycle FETs are the way forward just because of the fashion? Because the cumulative live birth rate is same for both the things, in the sense that if you have a patient, you simulated, you made embryos, you do fresh transfer, freeze the remaining embryos, use them, and ultimately what you get as a live born, and you freeze all and then transfer one by one and you get the live birth, it remains the same. So there is no particular fact, entire community agrees to that. Then why to freeze the embryos? Indications, of course, surplus embryos in fresh cycle, there is a no-brainer, we do it. OHSS risk is high. Now, this again is a topic Rishikesh was talking about, that using agonist protocol is criminal. I absolutely don't agree to that, because we have been using agonist protocol for more than 22 years in IVF. And if you follow a simple criteria, what we call as Babishi criteria for OHSS prevention, and they are all very simple clinical criteria based on only three things: total volume of stimulated ovary on the day of transfer less than 200, the fluid, the free fluid in pelvis less than +4, that means it's not surrounding the uterus, and hematocrit less than 44. If the patient is asymptomatic, even if you do fresh, there is hardly any risk of OHSS. Rest of the patients, if the situation is borderline, you can discuss with the patient and decide, and the situation is bad, you freeze all. So OHSS risk is high. In that case also, we may do freeze all. And of course, the third-party reproduction, that also is one of the major embryos is useful. And some of the times that the patients have realized that even after the married life, they don't want pregnancy very soon, so they can freeze their embryos and use them later. Of course, the cancer therapy, multiple cancers, of course, and before extensive planned surgery on genital organs, or chemotherapy for non-cancerous conditions which can adversely affect the fertility potential of a woman, then also if she is married, having male partner, freezing embryos are good option. Anything, as I said, bone marrow transplant, early diagnosis condition like Turner syndrome, one of the spouse having risk of injury or death, delayed parenthood, all these are the indications. Briefly, if we see that whether embryo freezing and using is successful or not, the preservation of gametes of embryos of gonadal tissue for the future fertility of sperm was done in 1953. Embryos were frozen, but at that time it was the what we call a slow freezing technique, 1983, and the first live birth in 1984. And then, of course, the frozen oocyte with slow freezing, the first pregnancy was achieved in 1986. Then came the revolutionary vitrification technique in 1998, the first pregnancy, oocyte vitrification 1999, ovarian tissue freezing 2004, and India's first live birth with vitrified frozen oocyte at Babishi Fertility Institute in 2009. So we are happy that the freezing has come a long way. And of course, it can be egg, embryo, semen, testicular tissue, etc. But we'll restrict again back to the IVF with the freeze all versus the segmented IVF or the fresh transfer and no fresh transfer. Now, what is all freeze or freeze all or segmented IVF? Elective freezing of all embryos and it in natural cycle or natural like HRT cycles. The advantage is one was said that OHSS risk is low, but let me tell you that only 10% of the patients they come with OHSS risk. All the patients do not have OHSS risk, so those are the patients who qualify for this. And better pregnancy chance in first ET. So if you are doing ET, then the first ET, if it is fresh and first ET, it is the freeze all patient, then you may get a better pregnancy chance in the first ET. But what is a disadvantage? More time to achieve pregnancy. Now this is real disadvantage because go for stimulation, then they freeze it, they allow the ovaries to become quiescent, prepare their endometrium, then transfer, and then so at least 1 more month and 1 more treatment cycle. Additional cost of freezing, FET, inconvenience of taking 2 treatment cycle. This is something which is not justified unless we have a real significant advantage of doing it. So if we compare fresh ET pregnancy chance versus the first ET pregnancy chance, similar in both groups if the egg number is not very high. This is again a very important point to understand, that freeze all does not work better for all the patients who are normal responders. So if the patient is a normal responder, then even if you do a freeze all, remains the same in both the groups. Freeze all does not offer better live birth rate in normal responders in the first ET. And again, most important, cumulative birth rate per cycle remains same. So that is something which we have to understand. Now, when we do embryo freezing, slow freezing was the practiced tedious procedure, lower success rate, but vitrification may change the whole thing. Rapid and easy technique, excellent success rate. Very fast temperature change, no crystal formation, glass-like effect in vitrification. So advantage is better survival rate, much better pregnancy rate, no need for costly equipment, and the procedure is very fast. But at the same time, there can be some disadvantage. That's a very high concentration of cryoprotectants are used. Very fast protocol, so needs excellent skill and experience of the embryologist who handles the embryos. And devices and media are much more expensive compared to the conventional slow freezing devices. And we have some concerns as well. Why we are discussing today as the outcome of frozen embryos is equivalent to the fresh cycles or not, because the freezing in itself takes the embryos from plus 37 degrees to minus 196 degrees for freezing. And then again from minus 196 degrees to plus 37 degrees when we thaw them for the use. So this is a big shock or thermal shock to the embryos, which they have to survive. Now, of course, the technology is there, research is there, we have experience, we have used ourselves, so we know that it does happen and it happens very nicely. But at the same time, it's not without. And of course, the cryoprotectant chemical toxicity. But the most important point which I would like to highlight is the epigenetic changes in the embryos. Now, what is the concern? Why are we bothered about these epigenetic changes which might occur in the embryos because of the freezing? And that is where let's have some look, and the literature is full of studies on this subject. So literature, if you review, you get lots and lots of papers on the safety, pregnancy chance, safety of the baby, the progress of babies born after the fresh transfers and the frozen transfer, the comparison between fresh transfer and the frozen transfer, the comparison between the natural conception and the frozen cycle it is, etc., etc. But I have handpicked a few for us to discuss so that we get an idea as to what literature has to tell us. Now, this is high birth weight in FETs versus low birth weight in fresh. Choice is yours. Now, this is the one important thing which actually opened our eyes as to we were happy that the babies are becoming or coming normal. But consistently when it was observed that there was a higher weight of the babies born through frozen ETs, it really struck to our mind that low birth weight and very low birth weight were all lower in FET, but high birth weight babies was higher. If frozen embryo transfer better for the mother and babies, can cumulative meta-analysis provide a definitive answer? The conclusion, if you read at the bottom, fresh ET, abnormal angiogenesis, abnormal placentation, maybe low birth weight babies. FET is higher implantation potential, better placentation, maybe overgrowth. None of the things are welcome because we neither want an obese or overweight babies, because overweight babies cause a lot of obstetric complications as well during the childbirth, like lacerations, cesarean sections, postpartum hemorrhage, etc. for the mother as well. Large baby syndrome in singleton. This is all studies I've taken is singletons because that is the best study to compare the results. Large baby syndrome in singleton born IVF FET, is it due to maternal factors or cryo technique? And it was observed because here the mothers were taken where they had one child earlier, which was sometimes naturally conceived as well, and then the second child. So the observation here was that we try to analyze whether perinatal mortality was related to low gestational age or macrosomia, since more large children were observed among singleton born after FET, but only very few perinatal deaths occur among FET. Singletons were either large or macrosomic. Now again, the perinatal mortality figures in post-FET children is variable. A few studies have claimed that there is little higher perinatal mortality in these large babies. However, many big studies and meta-analyses are not confirming the fact. So we don't believe that perinatal mortality is more, but morbidity can be. Association of in vitro fertilization with childhood cancer in United States. Now this again is a very big study, but again the study is big, but the number is small because the childhood cancer is not a very prevalent condition. And their conclusion was that the childhood cancer cannot be attributed to IVF rather than to underlying infertility. The little increased risk is not because of the IVF. So increased cancer risk in the babies born is there or not. And again, the findings say whether the increased risk is due to the subfertility itself or to the fertility treatment cannot be confirmed. And that is why this finding should not prevent parents from seeking treatment for infertility. Most recent evidence, if we are talking about the association between fertility treatment and cancer risk in children, again, the conclusion is the same, that frozen embryo transfer is the only procedure in Denmark. And in that case, they compared the exposure of the patient to estrogen and progesterone, and then the cancer risk. And then they concluded that in spite of the estrogen and progesterone exposure, which happens in the FETs or the natural cycle or the stimulated cycle, the children born are not having a higher risk of cancer. So just a simplified presentation or compilation of what I said, if I put it here, that large for gestational age singleton pregnancies in frozen ET is more. And this is the real concern which has raised the eyebrows of everybody, and constant evaluation is going on as to why this is happening. We really don't have an answer to why this is happening, but this is something not very pleasant because neither of the normal, neither side of the normal is good. Birth weight singleton pregnancy is more. Very high birth weight singleton pregnancies are also more in frozen ET. Not only that, you will be surprised that both the things, like in the fresh ET and frozen ET, the maternal complication risk is also variable. However, none of them reduces the maternal complication risk, but there is a variation in the maternal complication risk. Like hypertensive disorder in the pregnancy, in the singleton pregnancy after frozen ET is. If we say the fresh ET and frozen ET, in small for gestation age singleton, it is less. Low birth weight, frozen ET is less. Very low birth weight, frozen ET is less. And preterm delivery rate, frozen ET is comparatively less. And if we very preterm delivery before 32 weeks, that again in frozen ET is less. And surprisingly, Down syndrome risk in frozen ET is also less. So there are advantages and disadvantages. Placenta previa, placental abruption, and perinatal mortality in frozen ET is also less in some studies, whereas antepartum hemorrhage, NICU admission, congenital malformation, and perinatal mortality in both the groups, fresh ET and frozen ET, has remained same. I have not quoted all the studies, but this is the conclusion of the meta-analysis, which has analyzed many reliable studies. So the debate will continue, whether we should freeze all or we should do a fresh transfer as well. The first thing is that cumulative live birth rate at the end of remains the same. So that is the first fundamental thing. The second fundamental thing which we have concluded through this presentation by elaborate review of the literature and our personal experience as well is there is no higher risk to the babies in either side, either in the fresh transfer or in the frozen transfers, because both of them have some advantages and some disadvantages. It is very difficult to generalize something in infertile group of patients because there are lots and lots of variable in the couples, right from male factor to the female factor, age, other medical conditions, ethnic variations, cultural things, nutritional status, environment, pollution, this, that, and also there are so many variables that it is very difficult to generalize. But at the same time, that there is no major difference between the two. So now, whether we do freeze all just for the sake of that it is something new and different, or whether we really have an advantage, we have to decide on the case-to-case basis. And as proven beyond doubt that in normal responders, fresh ET gives equally good results. So freeze all is better reserved for the patients who are at a higher risk of OHSS or for other reasons which we have already discussed, want to freeze them all. But the answer to the question which we are discussing, or the conclusion to my presentation here, is that the frozen ET does not affect adversely the perinatal outcome or the health of the neonates to a great extent. Of course, the question marks or the concerns which are raised are continuously being analyzed. And if we have something more to understand or to offer or to change, maybe science is a fast developing thing and we will have that in future. Thank you so much for a patient hearing throughout my presentation. Thanks.